Thank you. Good morning to everyone. And thanks also to Walter, Nick, and Davide from my side. It was great really to count on your point of view and experiences and knowing more about the next steps of the Creative Europe program. I'm Marco Ingrassia. I'm a researcher at IAAC and Athanasia University, and I'm a member of the organizing committee of this symposium. It will be a huge pleasure and an honor to guide you through the different phases of this first day. So the first panel focuses on responsive technologies and playful platform. I'm really happy to welcome and introduce the keynote speakers and the moderators. So the conversation will be opened by Athanasia Tsertou. Athanasia, welcome. I see you are connected. So Athanasia is Innovation Manager at the Institute of Communications and Computer Science, Computer Systems, and co-founder of the spin-off company CIBOS Innovation. Again, welcome, Athanasia. We will continue with Jörg Noennig, Professor of Digital City Science at Hafencity University of Hamburg, Director of the Laboratory of Knowledge Architecture at TU Dresden. I see you. Perfect. Okay, not yet. We will then welcome Helmut Schrom-Feiertag. Hello, Helmut. Scientist at the Austrian Institute of Technology in Vienna, specialized in analysis, modeling, and simulation of pedestrian and wayfinding behavior guidance system. Helmut is a researcher in the use of virtual reality as a test and training environment. Thanks a lot for joining us, Helmut. And last but not least, we welcome Luc Pearson, leader of the Video Game Urbanism Research Studio at UCL Bartlett and an interdisciplinary practitioner, focusing on how video game technologies can be used in architectural design to promote a more direct engagement with the built environment. So thanks a lot, and welcome, Luc. So the panel will be moderated by Alex Mademochoritis, coordinator of the Master in City and Technology at IAAC, and Nick van Apeldoorn, who you know, researcher and project leader at Breda University. So the floor is yours, and Athanasia, you're welcome to share your screen whenever you're ready. You're muted. Athanasia, okay, perfect.
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. Give me 1 second to share my screen. So can you see my screen? The presentation?
Not yet.
Okay, just a moment then.
No problems.
Okay, so maybe now it will work.
Yes, it's starting.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. I'm the CTO of CIBOS Innovation. CIBOS is a spin-off company of the ICCS Research Institute. ICCS is an institute working in several domains, but one of our main focus is the use of immersive technologies in the service of circularity and the environment. So in this context, I would like to share with you today our, let's say, experience from these technologies and how you can use AR and gamification for supporting the engagement of citizens in those fields. So in the context of a European project called NextGen, we have developed a solution called Circular, which is a mobile AR solution for user engagement and for supporting training campaigns on aspects of circular economy, environmental and social topics. So the solution it comprises two components: a platform that the stakeholder can use to create AR-based campaigns around smart content. We have an intuitive content management system where they can create campaigns around points of interest, and then they can use AR content to guide their the followers, the users. And then this campaign, let's say, management tool creates mobile applications. So the user, through a simple mobile application and their smartphone, can engage with this smart content around a specific point of interest. So we have our content management system, and as I said, the stakeholder can identify points of interest in a map, pin them in a very seamless and easy way, and then to each such point of interest, they can use smart objects like a 2D image, a 3D object, a quiz, and then navigate their audience around their storyline using GPS or QR codes if GPS for any reason is not applicable. So here I show you some screenshots from our mobile app where the users can see a quiz, they can see a nice 3D model of a tree, for instance, when you want, for instance, to make them aware of what is the impact of planting a tree in a specific whereabouts. Then you can use this tool to ask them simple questions and then assist their training and educational process around the aspects of circularity. The stakeholders that we are addressing with this system and this solution is our recreational spaces, recycling centers, water companies that are using sites for improving the quality of wastewater through several phases. So for instance, if you consider a recycling center, using our solution, you can use location of key points of interest like rewarding recycling centers, parks and houses, so that you can educate your users around the process of recycling, the importance of recycling, and provide to them engaging educational material. So here I'm just showing some parts of our CMS system where you can create campaigns through a very seamless user interface, add relevant text, digital media. You can very easily edit your points of interest, and you can use different AR content to associate each point of interest. And here the user can select the campaign that is located close to them. They can watch a video. They can manipulate, so play, let's say, with each object so that this engagement process can be further supported. And there is also the aspect of a digital assistant, Aris, which is the virtual assistant that helps users each step of the way. And then we also use gamification aspects such as leaderboards and a social, let's say, aspect in our mobile application. I should also make reference to our older project, which is called Send. This is now finished, which we also experimented with gamification components for engaging citizens on flood monitoring. There again, using simple tools based on smartphones and a concept that is close to Pokemon Go. So using small and little animals, we place the animals in points of interest where we wanted the users to take interesting aspects related to flood monitoring. For instance, the water level. For instance, if a specific drain is blocked, if there is a blockage in the river, and so on. So using this mobile application and these Pokemon Go style animals, we use gamification to assist users in taking part in these exhibitions, demonstrations. We had 2 demonstrations, one in Greece, in Athens region, and one in Romania, in the Danube Delta. And we really saw that this gamification aspect and the users chasing animals, some of them were, more precious, and we associated more difficult parts in the campaign so that they could visit them. So all these aspects really played a seminal role in the user engagement and the realization of from the user's side regarding the importance of flooding preparedness and monitoring. So let's say, if I could say, like in a few lines, the key takeaways from both of our 2 experiences with Circular and the Send games is that these aspects really facilitate the formation of social networks, and the gamification is a key aspect of user engagement when it comes to environmental and circular economy issues. And these immersive tools really enable citizens to feel closer to global issues such as climate change, and they facilitate the creation of empathy towards these aspects. So we are really interested in these aspects, and we want to explore further how gamification can really support such initiatives. Thank you. So I could, I don't know if questions are applicable now or in the end.
Thank you very much, Athanasia. I hope the pronunciation of your name is correct.
It is very accurate. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. So we will have a question and answer and a debate at the end of all the presentations, moderated by Alex Mademochoritis and Nick van Apeldoorn. So thank you very much for your presentation. I will leave the word now to Helmut.
So thank you. Fine.
Thank you.
So I'll start presentation and try to share my screen. So can you see this presentation now?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, my name is Helmut Schrom-Feiertag, and I'm from the Austrian Institute of Technology, Austrian's largest research institution. We have several centers for different topics, so from energy, from digital safety and security, and our center is the technology experience. It's a cross topic, so every time humans interact with technology, with robots or autonomous systems, so technology experience is always an issue. So how has the technology to be designed that it's easy to use and creates a valuable experience during the use of the technology? And that comes to the topic of virtual reality. So there are a lot of ways you can use virtual reality, and our focus was using virtual reality in a participatory planning setting, and therefore we investigated how that could be applied to provide a wider area access to that technology, and how an application had to be designed that it's usable for citizens, so that it's easy to use for people never aware of high technology or virtual reality in special. So that's why we came up with an interactive system. So then with a urban planning scenario, and people were invited to test the system and gave after them their feedback. We developed such a solution. So was coupled with a multimodal traffic simulation, so that they see cars driving, people walking around, cyclists riding, and when you make one step on the street, the other traffic participants are stopping for you. So that's get more responsive on that, and we provided such topics, or let's say we provided some storytelling to keep people on track and introduce the idea of the new concepts of the design, and give them some tools like to make a photo, and they can look afterwards. So they can make a change between different layouts. They can also like a perspective, like in bird's eye view, and also have the view of a child, so that they get aware of what does it mean if you're a child in the street, and what is, for safety reason, what you can see when you're in the size of a 6-year-old child. And we provided and developed an application, and in an incremental way, so that we had at the end a solution where we can use it, and everybody was introduced then and could it use, so on an easy way. So the approach there was virtual reality is like to have a one-to-one measure, so that it's real. You have the vision on the real size, and that gives you a much other impression of if you're using like augmented reality over a CAD plan on a table. We provided also a playful interaction, so that means giving people tools so that they can fulfill some task into that, and also like storytelling to keep them on track, because let's say that this was a new district in Vienna, and there was also a new lake, not a natural lake, but it was installed there, a larger lake, and everybody was interested on the lake and not on the street design. So therefore we came up with some storytelling and provided them a pathway, what to find, where to go, and keep them on that what the architects want to show and which information they want to transfer to the citizens. Yeah, as already said, virtual reality is a powerful tool to provide people a realistic experience of future areas, future urban areas. So in advance, so there is nothing, it was an empty space, and then you can walk into and can have a look in the new street designs. And the main thing was this technology should be usable for everybody, not the non-experts or architects only. So we, during our incremental workshops and testing with citizens, we came up, we reduced everything we could on effort, and we also used one controller only, and also like during the storytelling and fulfilling some tasks, they get additional features enabled so that they are not overwhelmed at the beginning with a couple of buttons and different meanings. And therefore, we received very high acceptance and in the design, and also people are invited from the neighboring were very impressed about that, what could be done and how the new neighborhood would look like. So we have two showcases, one in Vienna, a larger city district, where about 20 people will live there in future. And we also had a new railway station, so where people get introduced how the new railway station will look like, and where are the escalators, the elevators, and how does that look like, and also like sound barriers and how they will look like to the neighboring and already living people in that area. We have therefore used a HTC Vive Pro and a gaming laptop, so to stay mobile and then to come to people. So it's not that massive equipment you need. And best speaking is a video. I will show you a short video. So these are like boxes, you can enable that. So, and then it's full up additional information. Then you have another interactive button, and then you can highlight some installations or elements in the environment and you get additional information. Then we have questionnaires, instant questionnaires like, would you like to stay in such a room, or which speed you would suggest in such area. And also like they got now a new feature and they can change between the designs. So if you have parking cars on the left or right side, or the new design is so there is only for a short stop an area, then we have the feature of the child perspective. So, and then when you have parking cars and as a child, then you see the difference at what you can see and how you get seen there. And we also then have another one is a bird's eye perspective. So you have an overview of the whole area and the street where the introduction was made for. So this is the change between the bird's eye view. And we also have like, you can highlight the areas where you can park your cars or bicycles, where the buses will stop, and can include information you want to show to the people. And with the concept of keeping them on track and with the storytelling, they get very good introduced in that what's the architecture and the planner want to transport on information about that. So yeah, the insights overall, 59 people had participated, and with our concept, so we did already a couple of studies in advance and overworked the usability and the user interface, and it was easy to use. They felt as being part in the virtual reality. So it's also like this was increased by the traffic simulation, so where the traffic participants responded to you. So other persons deviated from you, or bicycle stopped, or also the car stopped, as long as you stay on their track. And it makes a lot of fun, and they with the easy to use and with the fun, so people are more engaged to try out things and to test things. And there, it's also one issue on virtual reality is the cyber sickness. So we had no observation on negative effects on the cyber sickness there. That is also like we reduced the maximum time people are exposed to virtual reality to 5 minutes. And also like we had people from 12 to 85 years old and they had no problem with cyber sickness or with the usability. So most participants were able to use the whole system after a short introduction. And like many people are more or less are teleporting itself, are not walking around on their own. So you have a space of 5 by 5 meters you can walk. And the other higher areas you have to teleport. Most of the people are more remain on their place and use the teleporting more. And it's also like, it was very appreciated to have this opportunity to see the design, the surrounding, and also get information about the thing. And therefore we got a very high valuable feedback on questions asked afterwards, also in an interview, not only about the system, but also about the planning and the ideas that came up. So for us, it provides a complete new way to engage people and involve people in participatory planning that otherwise could not be achieved. And it also enables new possibility. They are not investigated now. So it's not only porting new methods or old methods in a new technology, it also provides new possibilities in that space. So that we want to highlight. Yeah, that was from my side. And as I know, the discussion will be afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helmut. It was a great presentation. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. We will continue and proceed with the conversation after all the panelists. And welcome to Professor Noennig. Jörg, welcome to the panel. We introduced you before, and we will now give you the stage to you. You can share your screen at any moment. Welcome for joining us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Marco, for the introduction. Can you hear me? Can you see me properly?
We can see you and hear you perfectly.
Perfect. So thanks for the invitation. I will endeavor in introducing to you the project and the participatory tool called UCode, which obviously is about collective creativity. Simply speaking, we have aimed with the UCode solution to build a system that helps to cross-connect the mandated urban planners, architects, engineers with the civic society and establish a workflow that is co-creative, that is productive. And we will use all kinds of available digital technologies for that, quite close to what also Helmut has shown before in his presentation. The process that we usually run through when the UCode system is being applied is a 3-step process. Usually we start with a knowledge campaign. We collect information, crowdsourcing background knowledge, contextual knowledge. Then we go into co-design campaigns, which may happen online and on-site complementarily. And the results and the harvest of information and ideas we then bring into a design intelligence process from which we try to derive information for the mandated planners, for the authorities, for the municipalities. We have built a toolbox which contains, first of all, the co-creative design tools. It contains a number of analytic tools. Then we have a toolbox or a sub-box of tools for communication and the process management. But before we plunge into too many details, let me show you 3 use cases or applications so that you can get a taste of how it looks like. The first use case was the redesign of a school campus in central Germany. Here we have invited teachers, students in order to redesign their environment of a campus area. And the Students came up after a 3-day workshop working with these interactive tools with designs that looked like that. Very simple, but some of them very telling. And the designs, finally, we have pushed to a 3D printing exercise so that all the designs could be carried home by the students. Second use case is in India. We were invited by the Indian Smart Cities missions to a project for the upgrading of a neighborhood park. So we have built up these kind of tents there. We have communicated to the neighborhood to show up at a certain time at a certain place. We introduced them to the online tool. Then we made a kind of a test exercise with the touch tables and the tablets. And after 2-3 days and design playing around with all generations from very young to very old, we came up with quite an interesting number of design proposals. So this is how it looked like in the end. And the municipality selected one of these design proposals in order to implement it. Third use case is in the German context here in Dresden, where I am right now. It was about the redesign of a traffic hub, a traffic square, the Försterplatz. Here we have invited the local citizens to make suggestions about the overall urban design with volumes, with built masses, but also to give ideas about the free space development, the green space development, etc. And here we have collected some 100 of designs and some 10,000s of comments and reflections what should happen with that place. The process, as I introduced already shortly, starts with a knowledge campaign. That's an online survey. So we simply invite people to ask a certain set of questions or to answer a certain set of questions. Then we analyze these questions statistically so that we can generate with natural language processing algorithms deep knowledge about things that the planners or the local designers may not know. All the collected knowledge we push into an online knowledge bank where all the entries are stored, are made accessible. And from the online knowledge bank, we extract something which we call the design brief. So this is the condensed and the most relevant or most interesting entries that were collected during the knowledge campaign. The design brief we use as a jump board into the co-design sequence. So online, we invited people into a design playground, quite similar to the environment that Helmut has shown before. So people jump with 2 clicks into a 3D environment. Then they will create such kind of designs very easily. And these designs actually will be pushed to a gallery, and the people can then assess the projects, can give comments, give a voting, and that will help us to identify the most promising design projects. And with the designs collected in the online campaign, which may run a couple of weeks, if not months, we finally try to establish, if pandemic don't interfere, local workshops. People will come to a certain place, will find all the designs that were produced beforehand. The professional planners are around, so you have a direct interaction with the experts, and then you can dive into the design proposals, into the design gallery, and try to refine and finalize these projects, before they get handed over to the authority. So this is the creative part of the UCode process, and finally we need to digest and investigate what has happened, what has been produced. First of all, we can analyze the process itself. So how many people have contributed, how much time in average was spent on their design works, how's the gender balance, from which vicinity, from which context have they come. This is all certainly possible. More original, I would say, is what we call the design analysis. So we investigate or look into the design projects, what kind of properties they have, what kind of inclinations, what kind of demands and requirements are there. We look into social media in order to find out what kind of accompanying discourses are there. We have certain metrics in order to analyze and qualify the incoming design projects. We can check the spatial programs rather easily. And then we have developed a tool or a component that analyzes the discourse. So how do people comment? How do people talk about a project, so that we can find out what kind of emotions, what kind of sentiments are in the overall process. That's it from my side. So a quick run through, very schematic, what the UCode system and tool is doing. I'm looking forward to exchange with the audience and of course answer the detailed questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jörg. It was great to see your work, of course, a part of the wide experience that you have developed the last years, and it's great also to see so many connections between all the projects. So I look forward to the debate after. Before giving the word to Luke, I would like to remind to all the attendees that they can use the question and answer panel tab below in Zoom, so we can also manage all the questions in a systematic way and foster the interaction, which is one of the main objectives of this symposium. So thanks again, Jörg. Luke, the stage is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much for the invitation. Let me just see. Can you all see my screen?
Perfectly.
Great. Okay, so hi, my name's Luke Caspar Pearson. I teach at the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL, and I run a studio there called VIDEOGAME Urbanism, that I teach with Sandra Yukana, and we also have a design research studio called UMP. So this is the type of work that we do in our video game urbanism studio. It's part of our 1-year post-professional master's program in urban design. We work with the students starting with generally no kind of knowledge of video games. We utilize video game technologies in a realm of different projects, a lot of them quite kind of speculative in their outlook as to how we might see cities differently or engage with cities differently through using video game technologies. So hopefully this video works. This is just a kind of oversight of a few projects that we have. So in recent years, we've been looking at multiplayer online environments and using games as kind of creative design tools. So in this case, we have a pair of students that were looking at, I guess, the kind of history of semiotics and symbolism in relation to architecture, which came out of a field study we were doing into the relationship between Las Vegas and smart city technologies. And so in this game, the students are kind of looking at the idea that every object, being a game object within the game, is something that has a kind of synthetic programmable behavior. So in this world that this game that they've made called Oddworld, players can come online together and kind of collaborate and fulfill a series of, I guess, architectural tasks that kind of also challenge the meaning of objects. We also had some students that were looking into the future of museums and the idea of social media and hashtags as kind of ways of articulating and sorting museum spaces. So this was another multiplayer game where a kind of procedurally generated museum would be full of objects, and players would have kind of creativity to pick and curate their own objects and assemble their own museums around that. And so we've had other projects that are looking at things like the space of infrastructure. So as we've been in lockdown in COVID, we've been relying more on things, and also students who are using AI simulations to actually make a 2-player game, which was about prototyping urban responses to COVID and COVID restrictions. So this was a game specifically focusing on a kind of compressed version of London to explore those kind of ideas. So I think there's often quite a kind of dreamlike and speculative nature to a lot of the work that we do in the studio, but there's also sort of slightly surreal contextual studies. So in this case, comparing the kind of the machine, I guess the machine gaming logic of Las Vegas to the architecture itself, and sort of reassembling the Las Vegas Strip into a new form of urbanism based on a kind of circus. And in this particular project, the students were looking at historic sites in Tokyo and the kind of urban history, and allowing the players to, I guess, kind of reveal the layers of history that structure that. So I think we've been running the studio for about 5 years now, and so in that time, the students typically make like 3 games a year. So we've got quite a broad set of different things. This was a student looking at a post-work society, so the idea that actually playing games might become more important were AI and robotics to replace, you know, certain traditional jobs and things like that. And students looking at how we could take game mechanisms from, for instance, Mario Galaxy, this kind of artificial planetary gravity, and kind of explore that as a way of organizing urban space. And then finally, I guess the kind of relationship between 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional space within a screen, and I guess interrogating the relationship between depictions of architectural space through drawings and their 3-dimensional reality. So, for example, this was a student project where the 2 students were from Asia, and they were really interested by the fact that a lot of imaging technologies for viewing cities kind of come from the West. And in a sense, they spent their year examining the kind of protocols and histories of Asian art in order to develop a game that was about a kind of a landscape painting view of an urban city, and the way that this would actually be composed with a series of these kind of dynamic fragments. So in my own work, Sandra and I, we make things like this. This is a game called Peep Pop City, which was commissioned for an experimental games festival in London. And it's essentially a kind of a tribute to Archizoom's Project No Stop City, with the kind of reflective boxes, mirrored boxes going off forever. But in a sense, we were really interested in creating a kind of free play zone that has a series of cards that are a conversation between an administrator and an architect who would construct this city over a number of days. But what we find really interesting, and I think for us is one of the key facets of the work, is that on one level, adults would play the game as more of a structured experience, whereas there'd be this kind of free assembly of objects by children at the same time, and this city would kind of grow over the days as a kind of relationship between a more structured and a freer play. We then took this project to EGX, which is a big games expo in London as well. And there, because everyone's kind of really into video games, it becomes even more of a sort of dichotomy between understanding the kind of rules and logics of this game as in relation to urban morphology and this kind of free play zone. So this is a project, we also use games as a way of critiquing cities. This is a project that's been exhibited this year in TU in an exhibition about computers and architecture in TU Munich. And this is called the London Developers Toolkit. And essentially this game's a kind of critique of the relationship between advertising, power, money, and architecture that we're seeing in London. So in places like Nine Elms in London, there's a lot of massive development of luxury residential properties. And so there's been a proliferation of this kind of architectural adverts and imagery that's kind of grown around the city. And so for us, this project was a kind of critique of this through a game where you're actually allowed to kind of generate one of these towers, although it's actually kind of random. But we also find it really interesting to use the kind of bright and colorful language of something like Minecraft to actually speak about some of the real issues and real kind of inequalities that are being generated in cities as a result. This was another project that we did a couple of years ago called Playing the Picturesque, which was looking at the history of picturesque design in the UK. Obviously, that's resulted in the design of certain parts of central London. And so in this way, we kind of integrated series games through projections that were kind of one-to-one projections into a series of architectural elements from the buildings of the architect John Nash. Again, in a way, what we found really interesting is in these previous landscape movements, which were obviously, you know, very tied to, again, to elite people who had the money to enact these things, but there was also a lot of techniques that really resonate with the way that game worlds are designed in commercial games with the way that these kind of synthetic landscapes were designed in the past. So for us, it was really interesting to use a game as a way of revealing a new history of architecture as well. And so I suppose in terms of using games as kind of creative tools, this is a concept that we've been looking at for a little while, the idea of a game called Everyone is Architecture. So it draws from Hans Hellein's famous historical proclamation that everything is architecture, and the idea of creating a kind of design environment that would be integrated at sort of one-to-one scale. So by using the game and the simulation of physics and things like that, but actually making people into building elements themselves, we're kind of interested in sort of really playful and potentially speculative kind of design environments that actually take place at one-to-one, and what kind of architecture this might produce. And the idea that potentially, the games and their aesthetic are obviously a way of encouraging many new types of people to engage with these types of design process, but that the design process itself might also become more kind of playful as a result. And we actually, if hopefully this works, we had the opportunity to be involved in an exhibition recently with Epic Games, where we were actually migrating this project into some of their architectural visualization tools, which I think gave us, although the project's still kind of conceptual at the moment, it gave us a chance to kind of leverage their game engine tools in a way of kind of thinking about this idea of this augmented reality kind of architectural building zone that might kind of be promoted. So I think for us, although these actually kind of ending on I think some of the things that we're thinking about more conceptually moving forward, in a way what we've tried to do through our own practice and through our teaching practice is to really, for us, engage not only with games as a tool, but with games as a kind of culture, and with games as a sort of aesthetic sensibility that a lot of people, especially younger people, are really familiar with and find kind of engaging and comforting. And so I think that's really started to kind of define our practice, which kind of is always now working between the virtual and the real, as it were. So if you'd like to see any more of our work, you can see it on our website or our Instagram. So yeah, that's what we've been working on. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luke. Great to see your work. Now I will give the stage definitely to Alex and Nick to moderate this conversation. Will last around 20 minutes, and we'll also open to questions from the attendees. So from the public, please use the question and answer tab to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you to our prestigious guests. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you all. It is a true pleasure to moderate such an interesting panel on a topic that is very close to my heart. Very happy to be in the company of a truly impressive group of guests. Now, this is a discussion about bringing technology closer to people through play. It's about adaptive and responsive public spaces, spaces that change according to needs, desires, and recently crisis. This has always been an unspoken desire for planners, but now as the practice of urban planning changes, new tools, as we see, are introduced to the planner in an overexciting, and it's a matter of time before citizens begin to react to it. In this one discussion, I will ask our guests to take a deep dive in their experience on important topics, such as the way that we design technologies, how they act as social and cultural connectors and at times dividers. We will shortly discuss the nature of data and the pitfalls of analysis paralysis, and a topic that is very close to my heart, which is the development of our profession past its current limitations. Now, before I begin, let me make a disclaimer. I'm also an avid user of technology. I'm an urban technologist. I teach master students how to approach these technologies. So please do not see my premise or my question later on as a critique. It's more of a self-reflection on which I would like to have your opinion, because these are topics that really bother me. Now, let me start with a quote, not mine, it's Churchill. So let's begin with the big guys. I will paraphrase Churchill. He said that the best argument against democracy, in our case, it's participation, is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. In our case, it's the citizen. Kennedy also said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all. Now, where does this take us? In the name of efficiency and battling the overwhelming complexity of the 21st century, we have become fascinated with investigating and planning cities through monitors, maps, tablets, digital twins, spreadsheets, and highly sophisticated software. Most planners, in my opinion, have become despots, strategists, polymaths, troubled geniuses, omnipotent, omniscient, modern mixes of Sherlock Holmes, Jane Jacobs, and Garry Kasparovs, who try to address the roots of a city's shortcomings through the use of inferring, deductive, and predictive techniques. It is my opinion that the inclusion of citizens is the gateway we need to escape this modus operandi. We search for more data, better algorithms, improved interfaces, faster computers, and artificially intelligent sidekicks. We place data, simulations, and analytical processes on a pedestal and tell ourselves that in the end, it will be for and about the people. However, if you've ever accessed a live Twitter dataset, you must have felt the eerie and creepy feeling of excessive unwarranted power. And if you've ever been part of the participatory process, you must have felt the slow pace, which contrasts the urgency of the planner's broader objective to fix the city. How do you balance the urgency of the urban issues at hand with the people's call for inclusion when one calls for immediate, efficient, and optimized actions and the other calls for active, attentive, and empathic listening? Do you see any pitfalls in our newly found fascination with expensive, data-hungry, sophisticated apps, control rooms, and desktop research? It seems to me that at times the scale is tilted too much on the side of data. And even some participatory processes who have a reputation for being inclusive and accessible end up coming short of meeting their target due to a lack of target group research, efficient deployment, or more often yet, an overestimation of the participants' understanding of the topic at hand. Is this a gilded phase of excitement over new tools and toys? Are we too distanced from the matter at hand, which is citizens' welfare? How can the urban planners and urban technologists' newly found data science expertise be informed by social sciences, such as anthropology and cultural studies, in order to get closer to the mind of the citizen? Nick, I really liked the beginning. In the beginning, you said that people react to stories. They're not numbers. I think this is at the heart of this discussion today. So how can we bridge that gap?
That was also my question. How important is storytelling in your games, and how do you use this game to invoke a wider discussion afterwards? Because a game is just an event. It's not going to change society as a whole. It's the story we tell after playing the game. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Maybe Professor Jörg, you would like to start. I believe you have a good background on this transition between academia to industry to deployment. Feel free to begin, and then whoever wants to jump in, please do so.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, and thanks a lot for the very enthusiastic or motivated statement. I mean, I think you touched all the nerve points that we have to take care of, that we have to be aware of. Talking about the stories, I think the people have to make up their design stories or have to make up their problem stories before they perhaps generate something and respond to a challenge, ideally by themselves. I can report from our experiences and systems. Perhaps you have seen that we let people not only design and play around and shape things, we want to motivate them to talk about it, because that's of course the input also for the language analysis. Very often you design things that you don't mean, or you mean something that you can't design. So it's extremely important for us to trigger, to motivate, to incentivize people also commenting their own designs, the designs by the others, and try to make sense of what has been produced. And I think this kind of sense making is very much at the core. What also Alex mentioned, people have to be satisfied. People have to be have to do something meaningful. It's not about producing more data or more schemes or design projects. We have to make sense, and we have to ensure that people are satisfied with what they have generated and what has been generated for them. And the sense making, I would, how to say, equalize a little bit or put in a similar level like storytelling. Storytelling is a way to create sense and figure out if things make sense.
And how is that for you, Helmut? Because you have this AR simulation, VR simulation. It can look very pretty, but how do you get the story? For example, from the city, from the perspective from a kid. That is something we need to talk about in order to understand it, I see.
Yeah, we had many stakeholders to include in such a project and provide possibilities for different ones. So from the governmental side and from the safety side, so it was not only the buildings, it was only the street room. And there was a new concept. So in city districts, most you have parking cars. And this district is planned more like you have parking houses at the borders, and it's no parking place inside of the district. You only can go to your house, putting out your stuff from the car, and then you had to go back to the parking house. And everybody now couldn't imagine how that life would be. I have to walk half kilometers to my cars, and there was horror visions about the situation. And the main thing was like showing them, here is a subway station. They made the subway station before the houses were built. And so then they started around the subway station to construct one quarter after the next. And they couldn't imagine how the life would be without a car or something like that, and how that would be. And so they can see how far you have to go from your house to your car, how big are the rooms, where is the school, always the real park, there is a sea. And that was quite, this gives them a more acceptance and more imagination about that, what they have read from newspaper, that was very bad issues on, because most people love their cars, but it is increasingly reducing now the numbers of people using cars in cities. So because already in Vienna we have a very quite good public transport lines, and in that area it worked quite well. But coming to that about stories and let people more influence the design process. It's not part of the technology, it's part of the planning process. So we started in where we can introduce it in the idea, in the conception phase, you can use it too. But the main problem there we came up was there is no 3D model for that to show them. Citizens are not aware about, or it's not working quite well when you use blocks, gray blocks for here's a building, and it will be this height. If you have no imagination how many levels you have, how the windows are, you should at least have windows or something like in there. And that was only a thing, is showing people already in the beginning something is hard work. And then therefore, at the point where you have already some designs or good designed buildings, then you have already some architects working on that, and they don't want any changes anymore. So in that step, so, and there is like what we are thinking about is using more this procedural features. So like producing synthetic cities, but they are more aware about they have facades, they have materials, and you have something to show, and then give them more interaction possibilities to vary the height, the distance between the buildings, the design of the streets. We also provided in the beginning, we started with blocks, with tree planting, putting banks, something to sit, and give everybody the freedom. But the main issue was that they quietly overwhelmed with these feature tools, and at the end you come up with one tree after another tree, and to trick the system, and very funny things arise about that. And it was most of that, it was quite playful, but it was not useful. And from the result, they played more with the technology instead of with the idea of that. And I think with a setting, with having the right peer users, peer groups, or leaders from some such interest groups, that could be then more beneficial to provide them more tools, more features, and then use it over the whole planning period and making providing them features already in the early beginning phase, like using buildings that are already available as 3D assets and assemble that to a small city. And if you have access, so open data in cities, so if access already to current buildings and so, then you have something to start.
Can I ask a question for Eric about this? Eric said completely in the beginning that what you normally see with these kinds of games and with these VR solutions is that people can choose from a catalog. And therefore, is it truly placemaking? Or are they only choosing from what you provide them, just like often ordinary public participation when it comes to placemaking? So to what extent is it important that people have a choice beyond the catalog? And how could you incorporate that into your games if needed? And I think this is also a good question for Luke, because he allows a lot of freedom into his designs. But do you also go beyond the catalog?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, it kind of perhaps touches on what was discussed in the previous question as well. And one thing that I just say we've always kind of enjoyed is, I think, an article by Ian Bogost about how algorithms are kind of held up as almost deities today. And he uses video games as a kind of contrast to that, because he calls them kind of caricatures. But I think that point also sort of rolls into this question in a way that for us, it's about the possibilities for emergence that you create within a system. So in a sense, to offering someone a set of tools that may be kind of fixed, because especially, you know, when you're making a game, there is a point where it needs to kind of be built and obviously communicated to the users. So then there's, on some level, at certain points, there's a level of fixity. I think for us, it's always the interesting thing is what kind of combinations can generate things. So I think the kind of example of the student project that was showed with the sort of hundreds of fragments, in that case, that the player's not actually necessarily understanding or treating them as singular fragments, but it's more about the kind of relationship between all of these in creating these urban scenes in the case of that particular game, or within the Peep Pop City game that we made. I suppose there's actually layers of stories which, for me, kind of extend the limits of the individual piece, because you can obviously read the individual piece as a kind of geometrical object, and because it's like a kind of three-dimensional ball game, they can stick into other things. Therefore, there's this kind of connection that can be made on the level of the object. But the objects have a meaning in relation to London, because a lot of the objects are taken from real buildings or real parts of the city that people who live in London would relate to. And then on another level, the game cards that we offer the players have a series of kind of mini stories and tasks that relate to, I guess, giving people an understanding of why London looks like it does and things like that. So the game card might ask you to like refine the skyline in relationship to St. Paul's Cathedral, or to, you know, think about the flight paths of maybe airport pieces that you've placed in the game. But in there's this kind of layer of narrative and story. So I think for us, we hope that it's that although there is a finite number of pieces, the potential interrelations or possibilities that can emerge from those pieces become kind of larger through the layers that each one of those pieces has. And I think that emergent property of games is something that, even with a limited palette, I mean, if you look at something like Minecraft, it does have a finite amount of different objects, but through the interrelations of those, the possibilities are kind of incredible.
Thank you. I would like to direct a specific set of questions to Athanasia, who for me comes from a bit of a different, let's say, realm, the realm of IoT, the realm of sensors, the realm of sensor networks. And I find this to be a fascinating field, and one that has been under discussion for quite some time now. Now, there's kind of, let's say, an issue when it comes to AR and the gamification. Just to let you know, I'm also from Athens. I really loved the application that you showed us. I find it fascinating, an extremely good job. There is one thing that I cannot help thinking, being from Athens, it's this thing of the digital divide. How do you bridge that gap? I recently had, just to premise the question, I recently had a discussion, more of a presentation with 7 80-year-old architects from Athens. And we discussed more or less everything that we do in IAAC. And their response was, my boy, that was a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much. But what about policy? How do you actually turn these inspiring tools and stories into actionable practices?
Yes. Indeed, this is a valid question, and it was something that came exactly the same, let's say, conclusions from our campaigns in the following sense. So the citizens were there supporting our campaigns in hundreds of them. They had interesting conclusions regarding blockages, regarding land use, and how this is, really can make a difference for future flooding situations. But then there was always the question, well, how is this information going to be used by the regional authority? Mind you, that the regional authority was the actual stakeholder that was creating these campaigns. So, and then from the regional authority point of view, they said, okay, what if, one day hundreds of people or thousands of people in Athens really come to this tool and contribute? How disengaged will they feel if we're not able to respond to their comments and photos and report situations? So, of course, technology can play a role there by trying to, trying to minimize the quantity of these messages, try to rationalize some of them to group, but at the end of the road, you need to have a stakeholder there that can really make sense of the conclusions and can transform that to a decision. So the people that reported these drainage blockages wanted to see these cleaned after the summer. So this, yes, I mean, engagement, you have to take it all the way, not just during your data collection, storytelling, which is nice, but you need to see the output. Well, this is maybe a difficult challenge that no one can really, no one can take the ownership of this decision and how this can be evolved. But I have to say that indeed, during our campaigns, the regional authority was really engaged in that, and they really took advantage of the conclusions, and they really did actions. But that was, of course, in a pilot, in a pilot phase. It is really challenging to really make that a tool that can be widely deployed across all domains. But it is something that they need to attend to if they want the real engagement and long-term engagement of citizen scientists in terms of environmental and other social issues.
Thank you, Athanasia. If I may ask one last jump on this topic, because I find it a bit fascinating, and I want to take the opportunity, since we have Professor Noennig here and his experience with the excuse me, let me remember the name, the Hafencity project of the MIT City Science Lab. You used Cityscope, and this, I remember in the presentation that you gave, you mentioned the importance of smart tools and good collaborations. Now, thinking again of a very successful project in Haifen, in Hafencity, one of the biggest urban redevelopment projects of Europe. What was your personal experience with going from this participatory process to being with the mayor and giving them the insights of this process towards the deployment of this project?
I would say that boils down to storytelling again. So we have the stories from the participants, the citizens of all ages, which create their stories and hopefully are able to tell their stories for their project, their designs and their ideas. But when it comes to us, compacting, extracting, abstracting the processes and the results, we will have to transform them into stories as well. So for the mayors, for the authorities, they are not much helped if we dump them hundreds of design proposals or thousands of comments as a long list of citizen opinions. we have to figure out what are the peaks, first of all, what are the peak opinions, what are the peak emotions. That's certainly something that decision makers are interested in. Then we do, especially on the level of the language analysis, of course, topic analysis, what are the keywords? That's easy to analyze and to figure out. But I think there was also a question about the discourse. How is the discussion evolving? Are people interested about it? Is the interest declining? Is the interest increasing? Do we have strong voices in the discussion about the projects, in the opinionating about the project? And these are the outcomes that we try to prepare and try to form it into, let's call them participation stories, to hand it over to the municipal decision makers.
Thank you. Nick, would you like to take the floor?
Unfortunately, time is over. And it went by really, really fast because I really enjoyed it. And I also loved how the audience participated in these discussions. So please keep doing that. I saw that there's still a question open to Jörg. So if you could answer that in the Q&A, that would be great.
I will do so.
Yeah, because of time, we have to move on, even though I would love to keep on discussing this topic because it's a topic all close to our hearts. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed. Take care.
Take care.
So thank you again. Thanks to all the keynote speakers. Thanks to the moderators and all the attendees for your numerous presence and activism. So we are now going to have a coffee break of 15 minutes, 10 minutes actually. We will start again at 12. If you want, we invite you to have a look in the meantime, for those of you who want to stay in front of the computer, to have a look at our virtual exhibition. You can find the link in the chat. We will share it again in a few seconds. The next panel in 10 minutes will focus on serious games for the co-design of the public space. So stay connected and see you at 12 in 10 minutes. Thank you very much again to all the speakers.
Thank you.